Two people can earn the exact same amount of money over their entire lives, to the penny, and still end up living two completely different versions of reality. Over a lifetime, that invisible difference doesn't feel dramatic. It never makes the news. But quietly, it adds up to six figures. Let's look at Alex and Jordan. They live in the same city and work similar jobs. Over a 40-year career, they both bring home exactly $1 million after taxes. Neither of them is reckless. Neither is chasing a luxury lifestyle or making wild financial bets. They're just living. Same economy, same income, same starting line. But if you look closer, a strange pattern appears. Every time they move into a new apartment, Alex just pays the deposit and moves on. Jordan, for some reason, always needs a little more. An extra fee, a cosigner, or a risk charge no one ever fully explains. When they buy the same reliable sedan, Alex's monthly payment is just lower. Jordan isn't upgrading anything. Same car, same engine. But every month, Jordan feels a tightness Alex doesn't. He isn't broke. He's just never comfortable. It's never a bill that shocks you. It's not a 10 grand disaster. It's $75 more on insurance, $120 extra on a small loan, a $200 difference in monthly overhead that never feels worth complaining about. It's friction. It exists in the air Jordan breathes, small enough to ignore in the moment, but large enough to quietly siphon off a decade of his life. Jordan doesn't lose money, he loses margin. Nothing goes wrong, and that's the problem. My name is Jim, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about the math we don't see. I didn't notice this at first either. For years, I just assumed some people were simply better with money. I didn't go looking for this. I tripped over it by accident. I only started seeing it when I lined lives up side by side and realized something uncomfortable. Jordan isn't failing because he's bad with money. He's failing because of an invisible drain. And once you see how that drain actually works, you can't unsee it. What's happening to Jordan isn't bad luck. It's a pricing model. The system doesn't need him to fail. In fact, it prefers that he doesn't. It just needs him to be slightly more expensive to maintain. We're taught to think of life as a series of choices. What we buy, where we work, how hard we grind. But we rarely talk about the structural friction beneath those choices. It's like two people swimming in the same lane. One is moving through water. The other is moving through honey. The effort is the same. The distance is the same. But every stroke costs just a little more. Here's the part nobody tells you. There's a quiet background calculation running 24/7. It's a file you never really see. A judgment that updates while you sleep. It's not a grade on your character, and it's not a measure of how hard you work. It's a profitability filter, a number that follows you from your first phone plan to the day you try to buy a home, silently whispering to banks and landlords how much they should charge you for the risk of existing. You can see how this whisper turns into real money. Alex and Jordan find the exact same apartment listed at $2 grand a month. Same income, same jobs, same clean history. When the lease hits the desk, the math changes. Alex writes a check for a $2 grand security deposit and moves in. Jordan is labeled higher risk and asked for first month, last month, and a double deposit. His move-in cost isn't $2 grand. It's $4 grand. It's not more rent. It's just more of Jordan's money locked inside someone else's bank account, doing absolutely nothing for him, while Alex keeps that extra $2 grand working on his side. Then comes the car. Same rainy Tuesday, same lot, same sensible sedan, same sticker price. Alex signs a few papers and leaves with a $420 monthly payment. Jordan signs the same papers for the same car and pays $520. That extra $100 isn't leather seats or a better engine. It's a friction tax. He isn't being punished for a crime. He's just being charged more to exist. And then there's insurance. You'd think how you actually drive would matter most, but in most states, that invisible file shows up again. Alex pays $110 a month. Jordan, with the same record and the same commute, pays $190. And in some zip codes, it's $220. The unsettling part is that the system often trusts a reckless driver with great credit more than a safe driver with a thin file. It isn't about how you drive. It's about how you fit the math. When you start stacking these leaks, the numbers begin to whisper a much darker story. It's $100 extra for the car. It's $80 more for insurance. Maybe another $50 a month, averaged out across higher utility deposits, extra interest on a modest credit card balance, or those small convenience fees that only ever seem to find Jordan. On any given Tuesday, $230 doesn't feel like a life-altering amount. It's a few nice dinners, a pair of sneakers, something you barely think about. But over a year, that's $2,760. Over a 40-year career, it's more than $110,000 of Jordan's earnings that simply evaporate. And that's the polite version of the math. That's just the cash leaving his pocket. It doesn't even touch what happens when you realize that that same $230 a month, if it stayed in Alex's world instead of being siphoned out of Jordan's, represents years of work that Jordan will have to do. And Alex won't. This is where things start to feel uncomfortable. We're told the rat race is about how much you earn, but for Jordan, the race is longer because the track itself is made of sand. The real cost isn't what he pays. It's what he never gets to do with the money. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Money isn't just a tool for buying things. It's fuel for buying time. Because Alex's world has less friction, he has more oxygen. That $230 difference, the risk fees, the interest bumps, doesn't sit idle in his checking account. He does the most boring thing imaginable with it. He puts it into a plain S&P 500 index fund and forgets it exists. If you take that same $230 a month, money Jordan is forced to give up just to have the same car and the same apartment, and let it grow at a historical 7% real return, the math turns aggressive. Over 40 years, that invisible leak becomes a ghost fortune of roughly $580,000. That's more than $500,000 that simply doesn't exist in Jordan's universe. Not because Alex is a stock-picking genius or some relentless hustler, but because Alex had the oxygen to invest while Jordan was suffocating under the weight of his own overhead. And there's a layer to this that's even quieter and more devastating. It's bandwidth. When your fixed costs are higher, your margin for error disappears. When every month feels tight, your brain stays locked in a defensive crouch. Jordan can't afford to quit a job he hates to start something new. He can't afford to wait 6 months for a better opportunity. He has to take the first thing that pays, because the friction tax is due on the first of every month, no matter what. When you have no margin, you can't take risks. And when you can't take risks, you never capture the upside of life. We like to talk about mindset and long-term thinking, but the uncomfortable truth is simple. You don't plan for the next 10 years when you're worried about the next 10 days. Jordan isn't short-sighted. He's out of breath. Alex isn't necessarily more ambitious. He's just standing on level ground. Jordan is trying to build a future while running up an escalator that's moving down. So what is this invisible file? What is this force that creates a $500,000 gap between two otherwise identical lives? It's the credit score. And this is where most people get it wrong. We've been trained to think of that 3-digit number as a financial GPA, a reflection of responsibility or character. It isn't. Your credit score isn't a measure of how good you are with money. It's a measure of how predictable and profitable you are to lenders. That's it. It's a rating of how efficiently interest can be extracted from you. The system feels ancient, but it's not. FICO only appeared in 1989. Before that, loans were decided by human beings who looked at reputation and character. Banks eventually realized humans were slow and expensive, so they built a standardized risk model instead, designed by banks for banks to turn human lives into digital shorthand. And once you look at how the mechanics actually work, the mask starts to slip. About 35% of your score is payment history. Another 30% is utilization, how much of your available credit you're using. Then there's the age of your accounts. Notice what's missing. The system doesn't care if you have 50 grand in savings. It doesn't care if you own your home outright. In fact, if you pay off your mortgage early or close a credit card you no longer need, your score often drops. Do the responsible thing. Remove debt from your life, and the system quietly penalizes you for it. Why? Because someone with no debt isn't predictable, and someone who isn't predictable isn't profitable. The system doesn't reward being debt-free. It rewards being safely indebted. Not so broke that you default, but not so secure that you don't need to borrow. Right in the middle, paying for the privilege of existing. This is the honey Jordan is swimming through. He's charged more for his car, his home, and his insurance because his predictability score isn't optimized for a spreadsheet. He's playing a game where the rules are written in a language he was never taught to speak. And this is where things get truly uncomfortable. We're taught to believe a credit score is an individual report card, a reflection of personal choices. But there's a shortcut, a quiet trap door in the system that reveals just how much of this game is decided before you ever play your first hand. Imagine two 19-year-olds. We'll call them Maya and Leo. They both just finished their first week at their first real job. They earn the same wage. Neither has ever owned a credit card. But when they apply for their first modest car loan, they aren't treated as equals. Maya's parents added her as an authorized user on one of their credit cards when she was 15. She never saw the physical card. She didn't know the account password. She never made a payment. But for 4 years, that card's history, the 15 years of on-time payments, the high credit limit, the near-perfect utilization, has been quietly bleeding into her file. The day Maya turns 19, she wakes up with a 760 credit score. On paper, she's a seasoned financial veteran with nearly 2 decades of experience. Then there's Leo. His parents didn't have credit cards, or maybe they didn't trust the system. He starts at 0. To the bank's algorithm, Leo isn't just a stranger. He's worse than that. He's invisible. He's unscorable. When they sit down at the dealership, Maya gets a 3, 9% interest rate. Leo is told he needs a cosigner, or he's hit with an 18% subprime rate. For the exact same car, Leo will pay thousands of dollars more over the next 5 years. This is how financial advantage gets passed down quietly. It isn't a wire transfer of cash. It isn't an inheritance check. It's the gift of predictability. Maya didn't earn that score, and Leo didn't fail to get one. But the system doesn't care about the story. It only cares about the data. Maya starts her adult life with the oxygen we talked about. Leo starts his in the sand. And because Maya's costs are lower, she can save more, which means she'll eventually be the parent who adds her own child to a card, starting the cycle all over again. It's a legacy of math. And if you're the one starting at 0, the hardest part isn't the work. It's realizing you're paying a newcomer tax for a game you didn't even know was being played. And then it hits you. The goal isn't to become a fan of the system. You don't have to believe in the morality of a credit score or think it's a fair way to judge a pot's human being. You just have to stop donating your life force to it. I started noticing that the people who win this game quietly, the ones who keep their margin and their oxygen, don't treat their score like a trophy. They treat it like equipment, something that needs maintenance. They follow a few internal rules that aren't about saving money in the traditional sense, but about removing friction before it ever touches them. The first thing they do is prioritize automation over willpower. They know a single missed payment, one forgotten utility bill, one statement buried in a junk folder can live on that invisible file for 7 years. 7 years of swimming through honey because of one busy Tuesday afternoon. So they set every account to autopay the minimum, not to manage debt, but to protect the reputation anchor. Then there's the optical trick of limit expansion. Most people think a higher credit limit is a temptation to spend, but people who understand the math see something else: lower utilization. If you have a $1,000 limit and spend $500, the system thinks you're desperate. If you have a $10,000 limit and spend the same $500, the system thinks you're stable. They ask for limit increases not because they need the money, but because they want the optics of not needing it. Finally, they respect the age of their accounts. They understand that a credit card isn't just plastic. It's a reputation anchor. Closing an old card because you don't use it anymore feels responsible. To the algorithm, it looks like erasing a decade of your life. It makes you look younger. And in this system, youth is synonymous with risk. So they keep the old, zero-fee cards in a drawer, letting the years stack up. It's a strange way to live, focusing on the shadow your money throws instead of the money itself. It can feel hollow, like playing a role in a game you never signed up for. But when you follow these rules, the friction starts to fade. The risk fees disappear. Insurance drops, deposits get waived, you stop being a source of extra profit for the system. And suddenly, there's an extra $230 a month staying in your pocket. Not because you worked harder, but because you stopped paying the tax for being misunderstood by a computer. Credit isn't about character, it's about leverage. When we look back at Alex and Jordan, the tragedy isn't that Jordan was irresponsible or made bad choices. He didn't. He worked the same hours, sat in the same traffic, paid the same bills. But because he never learned how to speak the language of the machine, he was forced to buy the same life at a premium. Jordan didn't lose his future in a dramatic collapse or a failed gamble. He lost it $60 at a time, hidden in the fine print of every contract he signed. He worked 40 years, but only kept 30 years worth of progress. The other 10 were quietly harvested by a system that turned his unpredictability into a revenue stream. We're told that if we work hard and save, we'll eventually feel stable. But the math tells a different story. If you're swimming through honey while someone else swims through water, effort alone can't close the gap. My name is Jim, and I've realized the real prize of an 800 credit score isn't a bigger house or a nicer car. It's the 500 grand in oxygen that stays in your pocket instead of leaking into a bank's balance sheet. It's the freedom to walk away from a job you hate without carrying a friction tax. The system doesn't crush you all at once. It just makes sure you never quite get ahead. Nothing ever explodes. There's no rock bottom moment, no dramatic eviction. It just always feels heavier than it should. You spend decades wondering why you're doing everything right, but the finish line keeps sliding away. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, it isn't because you're irresponsible. It's because you're being priced. The system doesn't care about your character, only your data. It's not who you are. It's what can be extracted from you. Once you see the rules, you get to decide how much you play and how much you refuse to overpay. You stop treating your bank balance like a judgment and start seeing it as margin. Because in the end, the most expensive part of this system isn't the money it takes from you. It's the life it quietly delays. If this changed the way you see your own situation, you're not alone. I'll see you in the next one.